Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. I'm Elizabeth Corey. I'm the founder of beatingtrauma.com, and we are here today to talk about trauma recovery. And I have a new topic for you today. I actually want to talk about something I'm calling the ebbs and flows of trauma recovery. And of course, you guys know that I talk about all of this stuff from personal experience. So this is really relevant for me today and actually more recently in my life. So I wanted to bring this topic to you today because you're probably experiencing some aspects associated with this yourself as you go through recovery. So I thought it would be good to discuss it. First, I'm going to discuss this as a concept, and then I'm going to talk about how our defenders have a tendency to use it against us. Because they do. And so that's kind of the direction we're going to take, because when you know how the defenders use it against you, it can then help you to sort of not get stuck in it, because you'll see it coming and you'll know what it is. And so that really actually is at the core of what I do. I really want to bring awareness to how we kind of trick ourselves, which is not our fault. It comes from the brainwashing associated with trauma and abuse. But if we don't know what's going on, it's much easier for us to get stuck in it. So that's what I don't want to happen. So thank you all so much for being here. I actually just rushed in the door. And so I'm still kind of coming down from that rushed feeling, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Jacks up the anxiety. But my daughter had testing this morning, and she will have testing next Tuesday too, and because it will run longer, I will not be here next Tuesday. So I'll let you guys know that now. I will also remind you before next week or before the time I'm normally live next week so that you guys are aware. But yeah, but I made it back today, just barely. So here I am. So I want to say hi to Jan. Thank you for joining. So, and please let me know what you think of these concepts today. Feel free to comment on what I'm talking about. But what I wanted to start off with is just a basic understanding of what I mean when I say ebbs and flows of trauma recovery, because that sounds like it could be a lot of things. I'm sure you've heard me say before that recovery is not a straight line from point A to point B. I mean, I wish it was. I wish every day just got a little bit better, because then it would be easier to track. Like, we would be absolutely sure, oh yeah, I'm heading in the right direction. Unfortunately, recovery definitely takes a more chaotic approach. And maybe it's not chaotic. Maybe it's only chaotic to our conscious mind, but actually it makes perfect sense on some other level that we don't really understand consciously. Believe me, it's hard to understand it consciously. But if you haven't heard me say it, you've probably heard other people say this. It's a pretty common understanding that recovery is not a straight line. I found thousands of images online of recovery kind of looking like this, and I've even purchased a couple of them and I use them. So I think a lot of people get this, but it also makes the process really incredibly frustrating, right? As you know, as I know. And we can really be pushing incredibly hard and doing a lot of amazing work, moving ourselves forward on a goal one day. And the next day, we can be just completely stuck, right? It's like we never did any of that work and we're just not able to move forward. And this can also happen in sort of bigger spans of time too. Like, we can have years where we feel like we are making major progress, and then suddenly we can wake up from a 3-month period where we were so depressed we just didn't function, right? It's like there's just nothing. I don't even know what happened to the last 3 months. That is a part of this journey too, and we can move in and out of these kind of spaces. Now, I will say it's normal for us to do that, and I like to tell people that it's not that we are we may be a little stuck. Okay, it's not that we're stuck. It's that we are moving into a deeper place with our recovery. Okay, so that is what I like to say, because it is true, not because I'm just trying to give you some jargon to get you through a depressive event. It is actually the truth. The problem is that if we don't understand what's going on, the defenders can really use these concepts against us. I mean, they are very good at deflating us even further than we already feel deflated by when we're going through one of those ebb places in our lives, or you're in kind of one of those dips in our recovery. We're struggling with some depression or some futility, or just feel really, really numbed out and unable to move forward. When we feel stuck, the defenders can come up and say a lot of things to make it worse, right? I mean, they sort of use these moments to take advantage to keep us stuck. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's horrible. Like, why is my own worst enemy sitting inside of me? And unfortunately, that is usually true. It's because they are very scared. It isn't actually that they want to make us stuck, or I like to say they don't want to stuck us, but they don't feel like they have any choice. Like, whatever they've been taught by whoever they learned it from, we just aren't allowed to move ourselves forward in the ways in which we will naturally feel compelled to do. So that's what creates this major battle, and that's what creates this feeling of being stuck in the first place. And then again, like I said, the defenders will then sort of take advantage of that and really give us a pretty hard time because they don't want us to kind of get, the wind beneath our wings there and start taking off in directions that the defenders do believe is dangerous for us. And I speak from very, very personal experience right now. I am going through a big battle, and I understand where my defenders are coming from. I understand why they don't want to move us forward. But they're wrong. I mean, they're basing it on childhood, and in childhood they were not wrong, but they are now. And so I'm going to keep working to move past those defenses. But if we don't know what the defenses are and what they say, they will kind of throw us off, and they may throw us off for a while, right? But they can get us really stuck. So I'm going to talk about some of the things they will say when we wind up in these kind of places, okay? Which we will in recovery. It is a guarantee. It's going to happen at some point. I want to say hi to Amanda and Rebecca. So glad you guys are here. So let's talk about what kind of things they might say. And this first one I'm going to mention is probably one of the most common things I hear from people when they contact me. And I hear from my clients as well at certain, different times in their recovery. And that is, we are going backwards. Okay. So we are going backwards. The truth is we can't go backwards. And of course, this is somewhat a personal impression of this journey, but this idea of going backwards just doesn't make sense based on the energetic laws that I've discovered through this process. We don't go back into sort of a lower vibrational place than we currently are. That's not actually how it works. Now, what I do like to think about when it comes to recovery is this idea that we are going deeper and deeper into self. So we are connecting with ourselves on a deeper level. Sometimes it can feel like we're going backwards when we kind of come around that spiral into a deeper level of who we are, and we connect with some really intense emotions, either from our defenders directly or even some inner child emotions, like let's say grief, for example. We may feel like we have gone backwards because maybe one day we felt really good and the next day we felt really awful. And so the defenders will immediately come up and go, see, you're going backwards because you were doing so well yesterday and now you're not, right? This is what we hear. And I hear this from people a lot. But as I said, there is no backwards in recovery. We don't go backwards. We only go deeper. And when we go deeper, the first thing that happens when we connect with ourselves on a new level is that we feel horrible. It's really, I can really relate. It's awful. And part of that is because the defenders escalate. So we may feel more futility, right? We may feel more dissociated, more numbing as that escalation happens, okay? But that is not a backwards experience. That is an ebb in this journey, right? That once we've processed that, will lead to a flow, but it is not backwards. We don't do that. And I cannot repeat that enough because I hear from people all the time, I've gone backwards. And I'll say, my defenders are even making a really big case for it lately because they're like, look at how much better you were doing several years ago. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little while. But we don't go backwards. The next defender statement that we will sometimes hear as a part of this journey is, if you stop moving towards your goal, all your previous work was for nothing. So I heard this one a lot last year. It's like the one I'm going to talk about in a minute. These often are this sort of very all or nothing philosophy, which does, whenever you hear all or nothing, it does indicate an inner part is active. So it's something to keep in mind. If you're in one of these sort of extreme where it's like, it's either all, it's either perfect, or it's either you're moving forward or you fail, that means you're in a part. There is no grounded perspective that would speak in that way. So just so that you know, and I often tell people, look for the limits. If you're creating a lot of limits on your life, if you're really focused on that's not possible because, and that can't happen because, and that won't happen for me because, you're in your limits, those are defenders. Again, not a grounded perspective. So it's important to keep that in mind. Granted, they can be extremely convincing. So I'm going to give a couple examples here. So let's say that you miss a day on your New Year's resolution. And this happened to me last year. Last year I had a big New Year's resolution, and I don't really like New Year's resolutions, but in this case, I made one for myself just because I wanted to move forward on something. And it was to do quite a lot of writing. And I did do quite a lot of writing, but my goal was 1,000 words a day, which is a lot of words. It's quite a lot of words. And near the end of what I was trying to accomplish, it did get harder and harder and harder. And my defenders, there was one day where I just didn't get the writing done. And there was a lot going on that day. It was quite chaotic, but I didn't do the writing. And immediately my defenders came in and said, you missed a day, therefore you have failed. Therefore you need to give up now. Right? Like that was the message that I heard in my system very strongly. And, I caught it. I haven't always caught it. I think this concept of once you mess up one day, it's over and you're done and it's not going to work for you, so give up. It has been a very big message in my system for a long time. In this case, I caught it and I just continued the next day with 1,000 words and I finished what it was that I was trying to do. But it's, it can come in really strong and it can bring up futility and it can be very deflating when it shows up. This can also be associated, let's say you're trying to stop an addiction or you're trying to slow an addiction of any kind. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be anything from alcohol to social media, right? You're trying to slow this addiction or stop this addiction. If you fall off the wagon for one day, you are likely to hear this message. Well, you blew it yesterday, so the whole thing is done, right? This is that all or nothing thinking. So kind of watch for this because you may hear this as a part of your journey for sure. So the next one is kind of along the same lines, but it takes just a slightly different approach. It says similar things though. So the next one is, if you aren't perfect, you might as well give up. So in other words, if what you're trying to accomplish, let's say you accomplish it to a place where you are 90% happy with it, for example. It could be related to the quality of it. It could be related to the quantity of it. But if it isn't perfect, then you might as well give up. It is a very strong defense. It's interesting because perfectionism can appear on the surface like it's helping us, right? And that's what can be so tricky about the controller's tendency towards perfectionism, is it appears to be helping us on some level. Because it's saying, no, if you want to create something that's quality, if you want to do something that's quality, they have the way to do it. They have the plan. They have the approach that's going to work for you to do that. And controllers will appear very logical and very confident about that. But we also have to keep in mind that perfectionism is a response to shame. So it is an ungrounded perspective. It is trying to hide something within us that we feel is shameful. That's actually why we will deploy perfectionism. It's an emotion from our trauma that we have not processed. So that controller perfectionism will come in and say to us over and over again, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's not good enough, right? So it will stop us in our tracks. And this perfectionism will also be used to stop us in recovery work, because our controller will literally say, you're not doing enough. Maybe you're not doing enough writing. You're not doing enough reading. You're not doing enough work, all the while actually blocking us. So this is a fun little thing to deal with, but we have to keep in mind when we feel that perfectionism come on that says you're not doing it well enough, so you might as well quit. We have to remember that this is a defense mechanism. It is not helpful. And perfectionism in general is not helpful. I mean, I get it. Sometimes it does come in handy to dot every I and cross every T. I mean, I don't want to publish a book that has spelling errors in it for sure. Like, these are important things. But when the perfectionism is taken to an extreme, it becomes a defense. It shuts us down because the controller believes that whatever it is that we're doing is a bit risky. They don't want to take that chance. Usually when we're establishing some level of visibility or putting something out there that they think is very scary or breaks some kind of contract we have with our abusers. So perfectionism is a defense. Keep telling yourself that as often as you can, because it is meant to stall us out on the very things we actually do want to move forward on. So that's the next one I have. So the last one I have today is actually something I mentioned just a little while ago, and it is a big controller story that we tell ourselves, and that is that you were doing so much better before, okay? Now, I have heard this a lot, and I've heard it especially recently as I kind of worked through some really challenging blocks in my system. It's been especially challenging since I moved to, lots and lots of futility coming in, lots and lots of memories that I needed to get back. And I actually just finished a blog. I'm very excited because I've been really blocked on blogging, which is actually what kind of created this live stream for me. And I just finished one, and it's coming out in the next day or two. And it's kind of about this kind of blocking that I've been feeling. But what my controller's been saying is that you were doing better before. And they mean before I moved. But even then, they really mean before I started recovery. So because the controller loves to say that things are better when they were in charge. Okay. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean your controller's not in charge now, or they may be less in charge now, but they will always be comparing where you are now in recovery to where you were before you started. And they will tell you, even though it's a lie, that you were better off before. Okay. For whatever reason, maybe they'll tell you were better off in that abusive relationship, and they'll try to tell you a story about how it wasn't abusive, because if there's one thing I've learned about controllers, they love denial. Their stories are full of denial, and they will make you forget how bad things were before you started to wake up and recover. And so they will actually try to convince you that being in full survival mode actually is a better thing. Well, because they think it keeps us alive. But it's actually a better thing than really actually living life in a more authentic, grounded way. And they do that mostly because they're terrified. But the problem is we can't necessarily see that fear when the controller is lecturing us, because they can sound really logical in the mind. In the conscious mind, they can sound like they know what they're talking about, and they can be very convincing, especially when we grew up having to tell ourselves stories about our environment that weren't true. We're very susceptible to the denial stories that the controller tells us. The last few years, I've been struggling. I've been pushing through a lot of memories, a lot of futility. I haven't been doing some of the things I was doing before. I don't like that. Who would, right? But my controller's there going, see, you were better off before you took all these chances and took all these risks and tried something new. And, you were better off. It was better off in that other environment, And that is what we will often hear from controllers. You've lost some productivity. That's a problem. You were better off before. You should have stayed where you were. That kind of messaging is going to be a big part of the defense that we will have in our systems. I want to kind of summarize and finish up here by saying ebbs and flows are normal in recovery. We are going to go up and down, up and down. Now, will we be moving in a trajectory that's generally forward and north? Yes, we will be. But when we're in that ebb, we will often feel like there is absolutely no hope. That is what futility tells us. That is the point of it. Literally, that's what it says. So we will feel that. And then when we have parts giving us these kind of stories that I've been talking about today, it's very easy to just believe them. And it can be quite easy to just stop what we're doing and get stuck for quite a while. We can get stuck in this place for a long time. The best thing we could do is when we hear one of these messages, we'll want to write from it. We want to pull that information out of the unconscious and into the conscious mind where the adult self can see it and transform it and move out of it. Is it going to happen right away? Is this a quick process? No, this is not. It's frustratingly not quick, right? But if we commit to writing from those kind of limiting messages that we're hearing, it will make a difference in the stuckness that we are feeling. Jen is saying, thank you for bringing futility out of the darkness into the light with clarity. When I can name it, I can see it for what it is and not feel mysteriously controlled by it. That's a good word, mysteriously controlled. Thank you so much. Ebbs and flows, the grace of floating to recovery. It's quite like that. And it's interesting the way you say that, because there are so many programs that talk about emotions and they just don't give futility the kind of focus that it needs. Like, I've even heard my clients have told me about programs out there they've tried where futility isn't even considered an emotion. I am here to tell you it is. It's actually one of the most important primary emotions we can see in our recovery. It is big. There's a lot of it. It's frustrating how much there is of it. It is the emotion that drives us towards depression. It also drives us towards suicidal ideation. And getting our understanding around this emotion, bringing awareness to it and writing from it, honestly, it can be incredibly life-changing. So thank you for what you said there, Jan. I appreciate it. So let's see. Trish is saying, I know that without this work, I'd believe the downtimes would be forever and there's no hope of change. Yeah. And that's exactly what futility says. So if you are currently hearing there is no hope of change, write from it, because it's your karma, kid. It's your futility. It's supposed to be there. It's a flashback. It's from childhood, and it will help you so much to really start bringing that out of the unconscious and into the conscious. Amanda's saying, it's like you're always reading my mind. Where's the camera? Yeah, and that's the thing about recovery. A lot of people say, you can't box everybody in and say everybody has this part or everybody has this emotion or everybody thinks this way. But I'm definitely not trying to do that, although I do hear people say that to me. The truth is that while all of our trauma is different, we have, different experiences, we do tend to have, like, the psyche tends to kind of follow some patterns that can be, like, quite similar between us. And I think that's what allows us to do this kind of work where we can bring awareness to it, right? So like when I discovered this basically through this process of coming out and talking about it. How many people were like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's my brain. Oh my God, that's happening. Yeah, like, it's like you're reading my mind. And I realized, oh wow, this really is like very similar for a lot of people. And so I think that's so powerful because then we can bring our awareness to it because people can go, yeah, that's happening to me too. So I'm glad it's resonating with you. I mean, I also am not glad it's resonating with you. You get the idea. So thank you all so much for being here. And I look forward to talking to you, not next week, which, Trish, that will actually be the last week of the time change, but the following week. I will see you all then. Bye.